overall. And then I have an argument that I could possibly use.
You still reject it being logically possible?
No, not logically possible. I do agree that.
I'm saying you used to.
What'd you say?
You used to reject it being logically possible?
Did I used to?
Like
okay.
infinite regress.
No. So when I was like very, very like new to like the whole logical thing, I thought all the logical possibility was like any sort of like contradiction that can be like entailed. But then someone told me, like, I'd say semi recently, that actually it would have to be some sort of like contradiction within the premise itself, within the proposition itself. So I wouldn't say it's logically impossible. No, I don't think that if I was to say, for example, is it conceivable that there is a collection of elements that do not have a beginning or an end? There's nothing within that proposition that would seem to indicate that it's a logical impossibility. However, I do think there are some contradictions that can be entailed, and which is why I'm saying it's a metaphysical impossibility, if no logical one.
I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, I don't know. That's what you said. You could like tell me it again afterwards, but because you said something that didn't make any sense to me.
What, right now?
You could just debate FallenGod.
Yeah. So FallenGod, what do you want to debate about? Theology?
It doesn't really matter. It seemed like you wanted to talk about like free will or God or some other stuff, but it doesn't really care.
Well, we can talk for as long as I have time. School for me starts tomorrow, so if I leave for like randomly, then you probably know why. But we could just go over theology, maybe free will and stuff like that. I don't know. But obviously, this is the first argument that I pretty much use in favor of the existence of God or this necessary being. So it goes something along the lines of this. It goes, if all beings are derived ab alio, or I might just rewrite this to say, if all beings depend on something external to themselves, then nothing would exist. However, something exists, therefore not all beings depend on something external to themselves. And that conclusion is identical to me saying at least one being does not depend on something external to themselves, which is being a se, or self-sufficient.
That's 80.
Yeah.
Yeah, so why would you think that, or why would one think, like, how do you motivate? Wait, I don't know, your fucking mic's echoing.
Oh, my fault. Give me a second, 1 second.
Yeah, so what reasons do you have for thinking that if you have like dependent entities, that just by the very fact that they're dependent would mean that nothing would exist? Presumably, this is going to be some sort of kind of like metaphysical truth, because at least if you look at this in any formal system, it's not, you can't derive some like logical contradiction. So I take it that you take this to be some sort of kind of metaphysical principle or some sort of metaphysical truth, in which case I would want to see an argument for that.
Yeah, precisely.
And under which sort of, like what kind of modal epistemology you're using, because presumably this is going to be an account of metaphysical modality. So what kind of epistemology of modality are you using to derive this, first and foremost? And then second, what is the argument for this conclusion?
Yeah, so that's kind of what I was touching on before. There's no like logical issue per se with the existence of like an infinite set. But I think the issue is metaphysical. And then can you just expand a bit on what you mean when you say epistemological modality? Are you just referring to like, how do I know this? Because I would just say it's
well, look,
I'll let you explain first.
Yeah, so the way that like modality, at least metaphysical modality, is talked about among philosophers, there's different sorts of ways that you kind of come to know certain like metaphysical truths. Because if you look at the kind of literature on modal metaphysics, there isn't any sort of uniform agreement as to what sort of account is like, I don't know, true. Like there's a lot of disagreement as to which account is true. And so I don't know, like one example of one account is like an essentialist based account. People like Not Bob Lowe, EJ Lowe, and like others, kind of hold to this sort of view. But I mean, it's not like it's not an account that's like uniformly held by philosophers. So, but that the account that's like being specified there can be agreed by other people, and they may like still disagree with the sort of conclusion that you're coming with in the first premise. So my two questions are, well, one, like in support of the first premise, what sort of account of epistemology of modality are you using in order to, well, one, govern, your modal metaphysics? And then two, what's the argument after you've established your epistemology of modality that like renders gives the conclusion that you're trying to establish in the first premise?
Yeah, so I understand you're asking me for an epistemology of modality, and I understand that you gave me an example based on EJ Lowe, and it's like essentialist account. But I don't really know what you mean by account. So do you want me to just like quickly like maybe search it up and then get back to you in like 2 minutes, maybe? I don't know, because I haven't really had the term epistemology of modality before whenever I've debated this topic.
Yeah, because
or do you want me to just, or sorry to cut you off, or do you want me to just instead present the argument first, and then maybe we could like infer what it is based on the premises?
Well, I want the account of the epistemology of modality, because that's going to be useful to getting modal truths under your system, and how you might access those truths, like what sort of relations need to hold between, I don't know, some observer or some person, some agent, and then, I don't know, those modal facts and the relation between the two, such that you can have knowledge of, I don't know, your domain of like modal metaphysics.
Yeah, I don't know if this is like an actual account or not, but it's okay. So typically when we talk about epistemology, we're talking about the way in which one acquires knowledge. So I'm saying, or what I mean to say is, the way in which I know this metaphysical law that I'm using to say that an infinite set would be impossible is based purely on rational thought, right? So it's not really based on like empiricism or our senses or our observations. Rather, it's just going to be based on rational, logical thinking. I don't know if that's a satisfactory answer for you, or if it aligns with an account that you're already aware of, but I don't know the terms, so I can't tell you.
I mean, that's like, I guess, like a decent first start, but I mean, that's going to be something that's going to be shared by any non-empiricist epistemology modality. So it doesn't, like, for example, like I mentioned before, like an essentialist one, or a conceivability-based account, like one like that, like David Chalmers argues for. Like those are going to be consistent with at least that initial step, but there's like more needs to be said than just that.
Well, I wouldn't say I'm operating under a conceivability type of thesis. I don't think that. Well, actually, when you say conceivability, are you just saying that if we can conceive of it, then it is possible under this modal scope?
Yeah, so a conceivability-based account is going to be using conceivability as a guide to metaphysical possibility, or at least like positive conceivability.
Okay, and then an essentialist account would be using what?
Well, typically it's split into like two questions. It's like, well, one, how do we, get knowledge of essences, and then you need to provide an answer there. And then the second question is, well, how do you go from knowledge of essences to modal knowledge? And so those, at least if you're trying to offer an essentialist-based account of modality, then you need to answer like those two questions.
I don't really see how. The argument that I'm going to present doesn't really utilize. Well, it depends, because loosely from what I remember of EJ Lowe, isn't his like serious essentialist account just simply the idea that an essence is just what a thing is definitionally? Or am I incorrect in saying that?
He doesn't give some. Well, he says something like in one of his 2012 papers or book, I don't remember, something about to like know the essence of something is to know what that entity is. But at least that on its face isn't telling me what the essence of something is, right? I mean, sure, that's like obviously a condition that needs to be met. But
yeah. So
there's still a further question as to how you know what an entity is, because presumably to know the essence of it, you need to know what an entity is. But I don't know, there needs to be some further fact as to how you come to know what entities are, or something like that. And you said you weren't going off some empiricist sort of framework, and you're just kind of doing this rational. So, I don't know.
Yeah. So okay, here's how I'm thinking, right? And obviously, forgive me if this is like incorrect or inaccurate, but this is just how I'm thinking, because I'm quite unfamiliar with this whole, or the terms you're using here. But if I was to say, okay, I'm obviously, and I think me and you are both, probably you more than I, are familiar with the idea of an infinite set, at least hypothetically. I'm not too sure.
Wait, before we get into like the infinite stuff, like the epistemology of modality, like even if you offer an essentialist-based account, it's consistent with someone being an essentialist and accepting that there could be infinite sets, and it's also consistent with someone being an essentialist and denying that there could be infinite sets. Like so like whatever argument you give, it's like going to be independent of your epistemology of modality. I mean, that is going to be some argument that you derived from that kind of account, but it's independent of it.
So what I plan to do then is, based on the descriptions you gave me, or given me, I should say, is based on what I know an infinite set to be, right? Essentially or definitionally, whichever one. I think they're interchangeable. Based on what I understand an infinite set to be, I'm going to derive some sort of inconsistency between what an infinite set is and its relation with like reality. So I don't know if you want like a formal argument. I could write one down if you want. Or
Well,
like just say one.
in order for you to show that there's an inconsistency with an infinite set and some feature of reality, you need to first argue that reality is such that it conforms to whatever, you know, whatever thing is being violated in your argument. So you need to establish that before you can even give that sort of argument.
I mean, do you think contradictions can exist at all? Like if I show a contradiction, a true contradiction
Yeah,
in the
but
sense
look,
that
it's not like a strictly logical contradiction. You already accepted that. You're saying that it's like a metaphysical contradiction. Now, I would accept, I'm just fine saying like, yeah, sure, metaphysical contradictions can exist, but you have to first show that it's like metaphysically impossible by showing that there's some feature of reality that there's some
wait,
sort of
wait,
like metaphysical principle or some law that
wait,
holds
wait, wait.
that like
So when you
can
say,
allow.
hold on, when you say that metaphysical contradictions can exist, I don't really understand, because my whole view is regardless of like the modal scope here that we're dealing with, a contradiction is a contradiction insofar as it cannot exist, right? So for example, if I give a P and not P with, I don't know, the idea of creatio ex nihilo, for example, and you know, whatever you want to say. If I say creatio ex nihilo is wrong and I give an argument and I show there's a clear P and not P in the conclusion that is entailed from creatio ex nihilo, it's valid, I defend the premises well, would you not then agree, based on this argument, that since there's a P and not P here that follows from the entailment or follows from the claim, that creatio ex nihilo would be impossible and impossibly instantiated?
Yeah, but the facts that determine as to whether or not it's a contradiction in this case is going to be not some facts about some particular. I mean, it's going to be facts about some formal system in addition to facts about the whatever metaphysical principle holds. So, for example, like if I say like I can run faster than the speed of light, but it's also like just true. Like let's say it's true that it's like impossible for anybody to go faster than the speed of light. But I say like I can go faster than the speed of light. I'm uttering something false. And the reason for that is because it goes against the fact that nobody can go against, or nobody could run faster than the speed of light. But that's determined not by some strictly some formal system. That's determined by some facts about the world. And what I'm saying is that you need to first determine what the facts of the world are, such that it's going to, if there is an infinite set, that it would entail that there is a contradiction. Because if the fact that, like, I don't know, if it wasn't a fact that nobody can run faster than the speed of light, when I utter that sentence or that proposition, then it's not strictly speaking false, or it's like it doesn't entail some sort of contradiction, because it's at least under like if you do an analysis under like just a strict formal system, it's not going to render you a contradiction. Because under logical modality, I mean, that proposition, it's irrespective of whatever facts hold in the physical world or like the laws or whatever. And so all I'm saying is that you need to show that there would be a contradiction in the kind of metaphysical modality. Then you would need to show like what feature of reality holds, such that if there was an infinite set, that it would entail that there would be some sort of contradiction.
Wait, I'm okay. So let me just tell you the conclusion first, and then you tell me, even with this conclusion, if I still need to do what you're asking me to do. Because I don't see the necessity of it. I understand the example of running faster than the speed of light. Obviously, if you give the proposition, I can run faster than the speed of light, logically, if you were to like look into the sentence, there's not going to be any like inconsistency within a logical framework. But if we like expand it into a non-logical framework, then obviously it's going to be an issue. I understand that, and these distinctions between modal scopes here. But if the conclusion, regardless of the way I reach the conclusion, right, is a P and not P, right? I don't understand. My understanding is, okay, the P and not P that I'm deriving here, okay, why I said there's not a logical inconsistency in the stars, because based on the proposition alone, you can't really derive a contradiction from it. Typically, if you want to derive a contradiction from, or a logical one, you'd say, for example, I don't know, there's a square circle, and based on the properties of a square and a circle, there can't be a square circle, right? It just doesn't make sense logically. It's incoherent. So in the same way, I'm saying, okay, based on the proposition alone, there's nothing about the meanings of these words that contradict each other. However, we can still derive a contradiction based off of the properties that these subjects possess, if that makes sense. I don't know if you think those are the same thing, but essentially the conclusion I'm trying to draw here is, okay, the P and not P would be regarding the properties of the elements of this set, both having some sort of characteristic and not having a characteristic simultaneously. And yeah, do you still think I would need to go and give you this epistemology thing that you're asking for? Or
If the analysis is done under like a strictly logical modality, then no. I mean, I'm fine with just assuming some like, I don't know, standard like classical logic for the modality. But if you're saying something more than that, then you still need to provide an epistemology of modality. And then Yeah.
So would I be able to present the argument first, and then if you decide, or if you say, okay, this requires something else, then we can deliberate
Well,
on
no, no,
what
no.
right.
Well, we can skip that by just. I mean, you already answered the question. You said that it's not just going to be analyzed just in terms of a strictly logical modality, and so you're going to be saying that's what you had initially said, that like there isn't a contradiction just and when you're like looking at the proposition, right? You said you already granted that. So now if you're going to analyze, what renders the contradiction, it's because there's some violation of some sort of metaphysical fact or some metaphysical principle. And if that's true, well, then now you need to give me the epistemology of modality, irrespective of what sort of argument you give. You need to provide that first.
Yes, it would just be based off of the essences of or not essences, the nature of an infinite set in correlation to, or the nature of an infinite set being incompatible with, I should say, causality or existence.
Wait, so what epistemology of modality is that?
We just say a serious essentialist type of view for now, because I don't really, like I said, I'm not well acquainted with the terms you're using, so I can just like experiment with this essentialist view, and then if it doesn't work, then I don't know, we can go back to the drawing board.
Okay, so you're going to be operating under an essentialist view of modality,
Yes.
right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that before we even move on, there's like, I guess, 3 questions you need to, I guess, answer. Well, first is, what reasons do we have to accept the sort of essentialist view of modality? And 2, and then like second question is, well, supposing you do have some reason to accept this sort of theory of modality, 1, how do we get knowledge of essences? And then the third question would be, how do you go from knowledge of essences to modal knowledge?
Okay. So in regards to the first thing, why should we accept this view? I think when it comes to things such as like causality and things that are potentially outside of our observational or outside of our epistemic access. So for example, things happen outside the universe. When we're talking about God's existence, we typically talk about things that pre-exist the universe in a sense. When it comes to things such as this, it would help to go into more of a rational field instead of looking into empiricism. And I think that an essentialist view helps with this, because all essentialism really is just talking about the natures of an object, and natures are not going to be something that is empirical. So like, for example, the nature of a square is something that I think is rational. It's not something that you need to like observe first and foremostly. It's something you can learn of or really deliberate over purely in the mind. And so then we can extrapolate from this and say, okay, now that we know these essences, let's see if these essences are compatible with the proposition that's being outlined. And if they're not compatible, then obviously there's going to be a PNLP there, an inconsistency.
Yeah, so all you've done so far is just shown that you can operate under a system of modality that uses essences. That's being charitable. But suppose that I grant that you've yet to make the step from going from that there's this sort of account of modality or or epistemology of modality. Well, going from knowledge of essences or whatever, to saying that account is the account that should govern our views surrounding metaphysical possibility and impossibility. Because, I can offer you, like, I don't know, someone can offer you a conceivability-based account of possibility, and you might accept that the account is coherent and that you can draw certain inferences given, I don't know, the axioms of that system. But you might like then deny that system should be the one that we use to govern, our theorizing about like metaphysical modality. So, I mean, at best, you've just shown that there is some sort of consistent story that you can tell regarding, an essentialist account of modality. That's being charitable, but even granting that, then you would have to show that, like, why should this sort of account be the one that we use for like modal metaphysics? Because all you've said was just that you just gave something basic that like you can use this to draw out certain inferences. But I mean, that's like something that you should minimally have on any sort of view of modality. Like minimally, that should be a requirement. Because if you don't have that, well, then your view is just going to be bad. So I mean, this isn't something in favor of the view. This is just something that minimally needs to be had in the first place.
Yeah. So in response to that, I'm not giving like a robust account for why we should use essentialism for an entire metaphysical modal scope. Rather, I'm trying to localize it to this specific instance, right? So when we're talking about this example, right, I think that essentialism would be better than saying a conceivability thesis or a conceivability account, or a conceivability-based account of modality. And the reason why is because obviously for dealing with infinite sets, I think the whole idea of conceiving of or conceptualizing of an infinite set is a bit flimsy, right? It's a bit ambiguous. So for example, Ed Fazer notes in response to, I believe it was Hume, when Hume talks about root contingencies and things, beginning to exist without causes, Ed Fazer notes that the ambiguity of his conception is apparent, because you can say the same way he tries to claim that this thing just popped into existence, someone else could claim that it was transported there and you just didn't see the transportation process. And so when you have this ambiguity, there's no real like exact or concrete or determinacy there when we're like analyzing this conception. However, with my view, you do have this determinacy. And I think that'll just be an additional reason as to why we should apply this view for this specific instance. Because I don't think essentialism and conceivability are incongruent. I think you can use both of them in certain instances. But in this specific instance, I don't think conceivability suffices. I don't think it's satisfactory at all. What do you think?
Again, yeah, look, you can't use essentialism and conceivability unless like as both being like the unifying sort of tool to, you know, govern our modal metaphysics, unless you're some sort of like pluralist about metaphysical modality, which I've yet to see any philosopher be a pluralist about that, and I would want to see how you spell out that view. But I mean, one, you just said that one could be, and you know, you're not necessarily committed to that view, so that's fine. But if you are, you would need to spell that out. And second, I mean, you said you wanted to localize this sort of claim about possibility. You said you don't want to cover, you know, an entire scope of metaphysical possibility. But even granting that's like, and I'm not going to grant this, but suppose that I granted, like, okay, you've shown that there's some sort of inconsistency with respect to this sort of this sort of essentialist account of modality and like infinite sets. That doesn't then tell us that infinite sets aren't possible, at least under the metaphysical modality, because you've localized your modality. And, you know, there's further questions as to what it even means to say that you have some localized modality in your modal metaphysics. Like, what does that even mean? And then it's like, even if you were to show that you could do that, it doesn't then mean that the, you know, if you were to you like then additionally on top of that show that like the infinite set entails some sort of like, I don't know, contradiction with respect to the essence-based modality. It doesn't then follow that it's like metaphysically impossible because you've already localized the scope of the modality in question. And if you minimize the scope or you narrow the scope, well, then it's not going to be governing, you know, broadly logical possibility. So, I mean, you have like some, like, I don't know, there's like multiple issues with respect to the sort of thing, like the move that you want to make.
Yeah. So you said, first of all, you don't know or you don't see how you can use conceivability and essentialism simultaneously. I don't really see like an inconsistency with that proposition. So, for example, I could say it is both conceivable that, and there is no like inconsistency with regard to the essences of these subjects when considering this proposition, right? So it's conceivable that this proposition is the case, and also when we compare the subject essences, it's also compatible with the proposition. And then we must just use both conceivability and essentialism in order to, in a sense, provide evidence for the possibility of the view.
Okay, that's a different claim. I think that's a different claim. It's a different claim to say that, you know, you can use conceivability and essences to provide evidence in favor of thinking that something's possible. That's separate from saying that on a unified view of modal metaphysics, that you can have both essentialism and, you know, some positive account of conceivability. Because straightforwardly, those are going to be not a unified theory. That's going to be some sort of like pluralist theory, because you're going to be saying that there's two sorts of frameworks that, you know, modal metaphysics is going to be governed by: essentialism and like positive conceivability or something. And if you're saying, yeah, and look, you can be an essentialist and think that conceivability provides some sort of defeasible guide. That's not inconsistent. It's only inconsistent if you're saying that both of these are present in some unified view, where like there's like one thing that is, you know, governing metaphysical possibility and whatever. But so it'd be inconsistent there. It'd be fine if you're like a pluralist, but I mean, I've yet to see any pluralist, you know, with respect to metaphysical modality. And I would wonder how you would draw that out.
Yeah. So what I'm saying here is not that there can be one unified framework. I think you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. I'm not saying here that there can be one unified or composite framework, right, that can apply both essentialism and conceivability or positive conceivability in order to determine metaphysical possibility. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that there are some, because I feel like what you're trying to do here is you're trying to push me into a corner here, figuratively speaking. You're trying to make me go for either conceivability or essentialism, as if there's like some sort of mutually exclusive frameworks here. But I'm saying, okay, in some instances, I can say an essentialist account would be better for our epistemology, and in other instances, I can say a conceivability thesis or a conceivability account could be better. And this could just be based on stuff such as reliability, which is what I brought up with the Ed Vaser example, because the reliability of our conceptions aren't as exact or aren't as determinate. And so with things that are outside of our empirics, right, it would be better for us to use things such as essences, which aren't based on empirics, which aren't based on conceivability or conceptions, but rather are based on the meanings of words or the essences or natures of words, as E.J. would say. So that's the first thing. It's just based on the reliability. And I think that epistemics wise, if I show that one framework is less reliable than the other, and I think it would go without saying that the other framework is preferential here. And I think the other thing you said, you don't understand how a localized modality would even work, or like how a localized framework would even work.
Well, before you get into the localized stuff, let's first address this so that we don't have too many talking points in the air. So the first point,
that's fine.
I'm not saying that you have to be committed to some sort of inconsistent view where you have to accept both conceivability and essentialism. That's not the point that I made. I'm saying, based off what you said, which was you can use a one or use the other. I'm saying if you're offering a unifying view, notice how I use a conditional. If I'm not saying that you are committed to you're providing some sort of unified view where you're accepting both essentialism and conceivability. I'm saying if you are, then this is the sort of thing that you have to do. And if not, then you're either offering a pluralist picture, or if you're not doing that, then you're just using one as a defeasible guide, but it's not actually governing metaphysical possibility. So those are your three options. And the second point was that if you're going to say that, well, in some instances, conceivability is better. In some other instances, essentialism is better. Okay. I mean, that doesn't help your case because you're trying to provide an account of metaphysical modality, telling me that there's two options on the table. Sometimes one option fits better when we do theorizing about some particular, aspect of, or theorizing about modal metaphysics, just saying that one account is preferable in some cases, and in other cases, the other account is preferable. I mean, that does nothing to advance the discussion because you're the one here with the burden to provide an account, telling me what sort of accounts are available on the landscape. That's not forwarding the discussion in any sort of way. You're just saying that, look, these are some options. Okay, that's fine. There's some options. Now pick one and provide an argument for that account.
Yeah. So ironically, that's what I did, right? So the whole point of my I don't want to say rant, but it kind of was a rant if I'm being real. The monologue here was to show that there are two options, right, that you presented to me thus far, the conceivability account and the essentialist account. And I said, okay, well, obviously there are both options are viable in some cases. However, the conceivability account is going to be less reliable in this specific case. And I gave, I think, two reasons, individual reasons as to why this would be the case. But me and you both, I think we both want to just further the conversation. So could I argue that as a logical inconsistency so we can get to the actual argument for God instead of discussing over the epistemology of modality, which I didn't actually sign up for?
Okay, well then, if you're just going to say that it's like logically impossible, then sure, you can give your argument then. But then you're going to have to further. Well, actually, we'll just skip that. Just I guess do that for now then. Yeah.
So when you say a set is infinite, right? Is it the same as, or can we formulate it like this? Can we say a set is infinite if and only if for every member of the set it has no beginning or end?
For any member of the set,
it
has no beginning or end.
Yeah, because the only infinity I'm really concerned with would be like a temporal infinity in which it doesn't begin to exist or it doesn't cease to exist, it doesn't terminate or begin, right? Not like an infinity of magnitude where, like, I don't know, you have like an infinitely large object. I don't really think that's an issue.
Look, I'm gonna just be straightforwardly honest here. I really don't care about the sort of discussions about infinity. Look, I think that you won't even be able to get your argument off, even if I grant this point. And I kind of I don't know, to me, the kind of points surrounding infinity are generally kind of boring. So look, let's say I grant you that, like, you can have some sort of infinite set. I mean, even though I don't actually think that, especially if we're talking about like logical impossibility, but let's say that I grant you that, just because I kind of just want to skip over this sort of stuff and I want to see what sort of reasons you have for thinking that we can deduce the existence of a being like God. Because, well, one, I've already shown that you don't have, a good account of metaphysical modality. I think I've shown that. And I'm fine just granting this point just for the sake of moving the conversation.
Sure, I guess, right? So that was easier than I expected. Cool. So there is no, infinite set of contingent things. That would mean that there's only a finite amount of contingent things. And so if there's a finite amount of contingent things, then this would necessitate a cause, no?
It would necessitate a cause?
Yeah. Otherwise, because I think it's a true disjunction here. It's either
these. Well, why? Wait, why is that? Why is that? Why does it follow that it's a finite set of contingent things that are required?
It would either be the case that this set is caused or uncaused, right?
Yeah, sure. And by contingent things, are you just including like concrete objects? Are you including states of affairs? What are you including?
Contingent just means to depend on another to exist, under my view.
To what?
To depend on another, because obviously we say contingent as in existing in some possible worlds but not others. But I just like simplify it a bit and say, okay, you exist in some possible worlds but not others because you depend on counterfactuals. And so to be contingent here is to depend on some sort of counterfactual.
And what sort of dependence, like, see, are you talking about?
I guess you could formulate it as such as if A depends on B, then in any possible world in which B does not exist, then A does not exist.
All right. Yeah, I guess. I mean, again, yeah, that's not really telling me what dependency is. You're just telling me like I don't know, some way in which the relation holds.
What do you mean by what dependency is? You want like a definition of the meaning of dependency? I gave you the relation.
I'm asking what sort of dependency is, like some sort of grounding relation. Is it, supervenience? What sort of dependency relation?
I'll say grounding.
Grounding?
Explanatory. Yeah, explains, it grounds, gives reason for.
And by grounding, like, you mean something like Jonathan Schaffer's sort of view, or you have someone else's view in mind, or do you have your own sort of view?
Whatever he said, yeah, bro. Sure. I don't know who the hell that is, but if he's saying what I'm saying, then we agree.
Yeah, well, I mean, if we're going to go under a Schaffer sort of view, well, then, I mean, grounding isn't like necessarily transitive. And so I guess if A grounds B, and like B grounds C or whatever,
What grounds A?
It doesn't follow that, like, I don't know, something like A would ground C.
Yeah, but what grounds A? Because obviously,
I mean,
like,
A is being filled in for some, I don't know, object or proposition or whatever. But
yeah, so
my point is just that, like, the relation, you're fine with the relation not being transitive, right?
Yeah, so causal relations don't have to be transitive at all, right? So obviously, Ed Fazer,
Right, that's fine.
He knows that
you're granting that they don't need to be transitive, then that's fine.
They don't need to be. That's why there are two different types of causal chains that I can reference there: an essential one and then an accidental one.
Yeah, that's fine. Wait, so it's all irrelevant then.
Yeah.
Then what's the argument for the causal principle?
Yeah. So then, if there's a finite amount of elements in the set, then it can't follow that each element has an explanation for its existence. That's within the set, at least.
Yeah, I know, that's fine. But I'm asking, what's the argument for the causal principle?
The causal principle? Wait.
Or the explanatory principle. You're offering some sort of principle of explanation, whether it's causal or non-causal, and you're offering one. I'm asking.
Why do these things need to be explained? Is that what you're asking me?
Well, I'm asking what motivations are there for thinking that the sort of explanatory principle you're offering is true.
Well, start with the strongest one. I think it would lead to an inconsistency otherwise.
What sort of inconsistency?
Let's just say logical to skip the shenanigans.
You think it's logically inconsistent?
Yeah, I think that.
Then just tell me the two propositions that are in contradiction with each other. If you have, some set of contingent things that don't have some cause, what's the logical contradiction?
Well, you'd be affirming that there is some subject nothing that has and does not have causal properties or causal efficacy.
No, we're not using nothing as a noun. So no, that doesn't work. We're not using nothing.
Okay, obviously, okay, yeah. So I understand this contention here. So typically, if you want to say, okay, the way I understand it is just to be charitable to your position, is I say you're saying a literal nothing, right? That is, causing or depending or grounds the other things, right? But if you're not saying that, if you're saying that it doesn't depend on anything to begin with, right? Then that would just be identical then to some sort of like merologically simple uncaused entity that grounds everything else. It wouldn't have any distinctions from God, in my view.
Wait, how do you get those sort of attributes by just saying that you can have a set of finite things that don't have an explanation outside of whatever exists among those like finite things or contingent entity?
Do you first concede to the idea that if it is finite, then there is a beginning to the set or the beginning to the elements within the set?
Yeah, I'm fine with saying that if there's a finite set that you can either arbitrarily or non-arbitrarily mark some point as being some first initial point of that set.
Okay. So then, the first point is what we're deliberating over them. So if this first point is uncaused, that would mean that it has no accidents, right? It has no.
What do you mean? What do you mean by accidents? Do you mean like Well, yeah, just tell me what you mean by accident.
Well, accidents can be understood as just things that attach onto the essence, right? So, for example,
Well, look, you've yet to establish that there are essences. So, I mean, you need to first.
Yeah, well, under my view, essences are just the definitions of objects. So, unless you think that there aren't any real distinctions between object X and object Y.
Okay, so
then,
your view is consistent with something like David Hume's like bundle theory, then, which doesn't have essences. Because if David Hume's bundle theory is correct, well, then they're just like then the essence of a thing is just like its like whatever properties are contained in its bundle. So you're fine with saying something like, okay, then if you're not fine with that, well, then it's more than just the nature of something, because you're saying something that's not consistent. If it's like just broadly construed, well, then it's consistent with bundle theory. And if it's not consistent with bundle theory, then you're narrowing the scope of what you mean then. And so what is it that you mean other than it has to be more than just the nature of the thing?
I mean, based on how you describe bundle theory, you described it to be some sort of an essence of an object is all of the properties of that object, right? Or the identity of the object insofar as its properties. That's not what I define an essence to be. I define an essence to be what an object is, right? So the essential properties of an object, what an object needs to be in order to be fit into or sorted into some sort of category. So I might say, for example, that in order to be considered contingent, you need to exist in some possible worlds than others. So you're contingent if and only if you exist in some possible worlds than others. So I think it's a tautology even, because that's what contingent literally means, right? So there's no difference between saying something is contingent and something has the essence of contingency. It's the same thing. If you agree that there are contingent things, you agree that there is an essence of contingency that is instantiated by all of these particulars.
Okay, so you're using these modal terms in your like definition or of like essences and stuff like that. So are you taking this sort of essentialism account to be governing any sort of modality? And if it's not, well, then this sort of line is going to be irrelevant as to whether or not there's some sort of logical contradiction. And if it is required, are you then taking some sort of essentialism to be what governs logical possibility? Because if so, well, then that's the only way that you're going to show that there's some sort of contradiction by like showing some facts about essentialism, about essences. And if not, if the essences aren't going to be governing your account of logical possibility, well, then this is going to be completely irrelevant as to whether or not like you're going to be able to show that there's some sort of logical inconsistency.
Okay, well, for starters, I think all sorts of consistencies, at least based on my definition of essentialism, circle back to essences, right? So let's go back to like the most rudimentary example.
Well, yeah, of course. Any account of essentialism has to circle back to essences. What account doesn't?
Wait. So, okay, hold on. Okay, so not just essentialism in general, but just logical inconsistencies in general, right? You'd agree that logical inconsistency.
Your account of logical modality is grounded in essentialism. Is that what you're saying?
I'm asking you a question, so if you let me finish, right? You'd agree that a logical inconsistency would be based on the meanings or the semantics of the proposition itself, right? So if the proposition has two contradictory properties, then it would be inconsistent or contradictory, correct?
If something is logically impossible, then yeah, it's going to be because it violates some rules or some or axioms that govern that formal system.
Yeah. So how can you have the law of non-contradiction without essences, right? For example,
because you might think that there are like certain truths about logic that don't require. Okay. Well, you asked me a question and I'm going to answer it.
I was going to add context to it, but
all right, go for
it. So I was going to say, the way I understand it is, if you were to say why the square circle impossible, I'd say because the nature of a square is to have corners, and the nature of a circle is to not have corners, and so a square and a circle have contradictory natures, and so they are incompatible. Right, that's how I would formulate it. I don't know about you. Would you formulate it the same way?
No, but
okay. How would you formulate?
I mean, well, yeah, but I wouldn't be talking about like essences or whatever.
I think you would be. You just wouldn't use the label essences.
No, I'd be talking about whether or not it violates some rules or axioms of like some particular formal system. And in this case, we've granted that we're like talking under, just like classical logic, just for the sake of not specifying some other logic when talking about like, logical modality.
Could you then?
And so you asked, how can you have like a logical contradiction that doesn't ultimately point to like some like law that exists or whatever? And the answer to that, like simply, I mean, you can have a view where you don't think that there are these like robust entities like laws of like logic, and you just think that there are certain truths that govern, propositions and axioms, or propositions given certain axioms of some sort of like formal system. And I mean, that's enough to like say like why like the contradiction would ensue. Just because of those facts. It's not going to be ultimately some facts about essences. Like where in that explanation do I have to appeal to essences?
when you talk about the objects themselves, right? In order to talk about what a square, okay, in order to even say there's a contradiction between a square and a circle, you first have to identify what a square and a circle is. And what a square and a circle is an essence, right? If you don't know what a square and a circle is, and you say there's any sort of conflict in properties between the two, and same if I say, oh, can a rectangle fan exist? Someone might say, what's the issue there? What's the incompatibility between a rectangle and a fan? There is no incompatibility because I know what a rectangle is, I know what a fan is. There's no inconsistency there. But the reason why we can determine these inconsistencies is purely based off essences. Without essences, there is no meaning to anything we say.
Okay, so when I say it's true that you can't have P and not P, or P stands in for some proposition and not P stands in for the negation of that proposition, where in that formulation of contradiction do I have to appeal to essences?
Well, if we're saying something is true, right, at least if, in order to be semantically coherent, we're talking about some sort of fact about the object, yes?
I'm just talking about facts about some proposition.
Yeah, okay, so, yeah, but if we're talking about proposition, we're going to be talking about facts about some sort of subject or object. We're going to be saying something like, it is true that you cannot have a totally white and totally black circle simultaneously, something like that. We're talking about a fact about the circle here. So the proposition here is still going to be talking about a fact about the proposition, yes?
Well, the like P and not P is going to be a conjunction of those two of the proposition that, like, I don't know, it's like white all over or something like that. And it's like, and then the other one's going to be like that it's not white all over.
Yeah, but even if we're talking about those facts, we're
I mean,
still talking about
that's just true independent of the content of what you fill in for P and not P. That's just the structure of like what it is to like have a content.
We're talking about what P means. P here represents, or what it means is sentence.
No, but do you agree? No, but do you agree that the contradiction is going to ensue regardless of what the content of the proposition is, so long as you have one proposition and its negation?
Yes, because the only way the proposition would work is if we're referencing a fact about the object.
Okay, so then contradictions don't have to result back into facts about essence.
Those don't entail each other at all, right? So you can have the idea that, okay, you can have like P and not P, and there's no like specified essence here or specified nature here that we're referencing, but we still need to, because what P and not P represent is a fact about an object, and this fact would be taken as its essence. So, for example, the white circle has the nature of being, I don't know, white and a circle, and then the black circle has the nature of being black and also a circle, right? So we're still referencing natures regardless.
No. It's all that's look, even granting this point, all it's referencing is some fact about identity. There's a further point that you're making that it's not just identity. No, but it's not just identity. You're saying some fact about essences, and you're saying that that's the sort of like, I don't know, feature.
I'm taking them. I think they mean the same thing.
No, you don't. You don't. Because the reason you don't is because I said, okay, if by essence you just mean the nature of something, and I said, suppose that like something like Hume's bundle theory is correct, where like some nature of some object is just a property, or the collection of the properties in some bundle, and you said no, it's not that. Well, then you're saying something more than just the identity. You're saying something more than.
Oh my word. Yeah, because essences talk about categories. They don't talk about like specific individuals. For example, I wouldn't say, well, no one that uses the term essence anyway, like Aquinas or like Augustine would say, for example, you are the essence of FallenGod. No, they'd say you have the essence of a man. You have the essence of maybe a philosopher.
Okay, so then you're saying that there's a certain nature, right, identity to something, irrespective of like, I don't know, some particular thing. You're saying that there's like some more general category of what those things are. Yeah, and then I'm asking where does that enter at all into the picture of like, I don't know, just classical logic in terms of, identifying contradictions. Where does that sort of picture, the one that you're describing, enter into that formal system? And you said you've yet to provide reasons to think that it does.
The LNC, the law of non-contradiction here, only works if you can see that there's an inconsistency with what those objects are.
Yeah, right? You might say that, and you don't have to hold to essentialism. You might say that because it violates like the law of identity, and you need not posit essentialism. Like, where are you getting essentialism from?
Wait. The law of non-contradiction. Wait. So do you think that if there is a law, like if there's a contradictory thing, right? So we're saying there's a P and not P here. Do you think that we can say that there's a P and not P based on the law of identity?
I'm saying in the particular case of like a squared circle, there's certain facts about like the identity of a circle, certain facts about the identity of a square that you don't need to appeal to essentialism in order to say that those you can derive some sort of contradiction.
You would be appealing to essentialism though. If you're saying, for example, that
you're not, because you don't have to say that there's some sort of fact about identity in terms of categories of things. You can just say for some fact.
Yeah, you'd say that the
you don't have to.
category of a square. You'd say that the category of a square because
No, that you're stipulating that you have to say of the category square.
no, you're saying that regardless, it doesn't matter if you say it or not. It is within the word. It's within the meaning of the sentence, regardless of if you acknowledge it.
No. So are you saying that like if I spelled out some sort of Humean picture and then I get of identity and then I ultimately show that there was some contradiction that I'm then referencing back ultimately to essences? I mean, you straightforwardly deny that, and so but you're saying that it's like still true, like here in this case, but it's obviously not true. So I don't know why you keep pushing on this point. I mean, at this point, it's just look at this point. It's just like I don't know, just feels like ad nauseum. Like it doesn't seem like you're understanding or willing to move past this point.
Likewise. Like I'll just ask you this one question here, right? So do you think that there can be like how would you formulate this without the usage of like any sort of keep in mind I'm defining nature here as the definition, the quiddity of something, right? What the whatness of something, for lack of a better term.
I don't know, but if you're using essences and you're talking about the whatness of something, but you're not including something like bundle theory, you're ruling certain views of identity out, then I don't know what the whatness of a thing is.
FallenGod,
and I don't know what the whatness of a thing is.
Wait, are you a human? Yes or no? Leading question. You might be some like alien from Mars. I don't know, but are you a human? Do you identify as a human?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, you're a human because you have properties that align with, we'd say, I don't know, for lack of a better term, that align with the category of a human, right? So we say a human is a rational animal, for example. Let's just say call it a rational animal, and we say you are a rational animal, and therefore you are a human. So you fit within this essence. We have the nature of a human being. Right.
Again,
would you disagree with this?
I can agree that I'm a human, but nonetheless, like deny essentialism.
I don't see how that's even possible.
I don't know. Take for example, like Hume's bundle theory, which you've straightforwardly wanted to deny. That's going to be sufficient to account for like why I'm a human. It's not going to be an appeal to some category of humanness or whatever. It's just going to be able to certain facts about me, and certain facts maybe. I mean. Depending on the account, you can specify whether it's some property or whatever, or you might say that the idea of some human is just going to be something that we don't have strictly, like I don't know, set clear conditions as to what it means to be human. There might be certain conditions that are necessary. You may not be able to specify all the conditions, and you may think that at some point it's going to be, I don't know, perhaps conventional or perhaps not. But independent of that. You don't have to appeal to essentialism. That's the main point.
So even with
if you're saying you do, but you're not understanding the point, I don't care to continue on this point. Like this point is just kind of, and if we can't get past this point, then I mean, we've been at this point for like 30 minutes already.
I think there's going to be some progression with your answer to the human thing, right? So you would agree that you aren't the only human, though. You would agree that there are other humans, yes?
Sure.
So then that would mean that there has to be some sort of
Wait, you think when I say I'm a human, and like there's other humans, that like every time? Well, actually, never mind. Continue.
Yeah. So
I'll specify.
You are a human. I am a human. I think I'm not 100% sure, but I would think that people like Mustafa and monkeyboy are humans. I might be wrong, though. I might be wrong, right? So you then agree that if you agree that there are existence of other human beings, then there has to be some sort of common property that explains all of us as human beings, no?
There's some like common like property that like all humans share, sure, but that doesn't then render essentialism true.
That is what an essence is. Some common property that explains a group, that is an essence. That's a category.
So are you going to backtrack on the point about bundle theory then?
No, because bundle theory isn't a category; it's an individual. It's one thing.
No, but if I say that when I use the term human, I'm talking about some particular property that's contained in like every bundle of like thing that I call human. Like there's some property or whatever. I mean, that's not pointing out an essence of something, because essences straightforwardly don't exist. I mean, on this sort of view.
Wait, I don't understand the bundle. Are you saying that within the bundle of individuals, they can have different?
If you don't understand, then how are you fucking denying?
Wait, I'm asking. Wait, hold on. I don't understand how.
Well, then don't deny it, and then ask like what it means.
I said no. What I meant was I don't understand how you're using it. So I said, are you saying that within every bundle there is going to be this common property, let's call X, that causes human? Let's just say that is human or humanity.
Well, no. I wouldn't say that is human. I might you could even say something as simple as this, that there's some sort of property that's contained in every bundle, and we just happen to like designate that property or it won't be a singular property. It'll be probably like a collection of certain properties that relate to each other in the right sort of way. And suppose that, after I specify what those are and what the relations are, that I say that we just choose to call these properties and relations that, relate to each other in the right sort of way, like what are sufficient, or maybe not sufficient, but necessary for talking about humans. That's going to be some fact about the way that we're going to be using our language. And it's like, that's going to be independent of the whole like essences stuff.
Yeah, I think this is probably going to be the last thing I say regarding the whole essences point, because I really don't have much time. But I don't really see the difference here between how you're formulating it and how I would formulate it. I would say, okay, as individuals, we have distinct properties. None of us are the same. We have different aspects. Some people might have different colored hair, etc. But if we look into these bundles, as you would say, there is still some sort of common group of properties that we as humans, or we as rational animals, describe or designate the label of humanity or human nature, as you would say, right? And so I don't know, that's kind of how I see it. You still have this common property within the bundles. I actually don't think bundle theory under Hume, or Humean, I think you said bundle theory, is incompatible with essentialism. And obviously essentialism under my view is
it's not. I mean, you could be like an essentialist, like bundle theorist, like someone like Mark Jago or something. But I mean, straightforwardly, if you're reading Hume, he straightforwardly denies that there are any essences or that there are substances, so at least in this understood in like the Aristotelian sense. But
I'm saying but I think I already
pointing out that it's like not inconsistent. I mean, that doesn't show that there are essences. It doesn't show that essences govern logical possibility. I mean, you granted that if just the structure alone, if you take P and not P, that's enough to render a contradiction, regardless of the content of the proposition, so long as one is like the negation of the other. Like the conjunction is true. Then, I mean, in no point there are you appealing to essences. You agree to that, but then you wanted to talk about like, well, you need to appeal to essences because you need to talk about the identity of things. And then I argued that no, you don't need to talk about essences in order to talk about the identity of something. And then you kept sitting back on this point. So
no, not exactly, right? So what I mean by essences is just like the meaning of things. Now, I'm not saying, right, for example, that in all instances of logical contradictions you need to talk about essences, right? I'm not saying that. So, like, for example, you could easily formulate FallenGod cannot both be FallenGod and not be FallenGod at the same time. Nowhere have I mentioned an essence, because like I said, essences don't represent or don't.
Okay, so then you're backtracking on a claim that you made before, which was that logical impossibility ultimately is going to make appeal to essences.
Yeah, but in the situation we're talking about, it does. We're talking about the meanings of this word as a category of what it means, yes, or what it is, we're predicating something of it, then yes, it would talk about essences.
Yeah, and then I've denied that. But again, it doesn't seem like we're going to make any more progress beyond that point.
Yes, but regardless of that, I don't even think I need to talk about this essentialism thing. We could say
why were you so...
bro, I'm not gonna lie. Mid-sentence, I forgot who brought it up, bro. I can't remember why we're talking about this, because I was gonna say it's completely logical, right? So you could just say, if there's an uncle, oh no, we brought it up because of the.
Well, no, your point was that it's like your point was that there was a logical contradiction and thinking that you can have a finite set of contingent things that don't require an explanation. And you said it's impossible, not metaphysically, but there's some logical impossibility. And if you're dropping, if we're moving on from the essence point, then what is the contradiction?
Yeah. So the first member, right, that grounds all of these things is contingent, yes? So then if that's the case, you'd agree that it exists in some possible worlds than others, and this would require an explanation, no?
No.
So it's just like a brute contingency?
Well, I mean, you're asking whether or not I think that it needs to have an explanation. The answer is no.
I mean, if this thing exists in some possible worlds than others, then it can't be taken to be necessary in whatever sense. So I think if it is the first member, it would have to be necessary.
No.
Well, it would have to exist before change, right? Since nothing brought it into existence.
Well, no, you can have different possible worlds that need not have that same member as the first member. I mean, this might go against something like branching actualism, but I mean, okay.
Yeah. But okay, you'd agree that this first member has to have certain properties, such as it has to pre-exist time. That's one, because nothing
I don't know about that. Why would it have to pre-exist time?
For all things that are caused, right? For all things that have potentials are actualized, it would have to be some point in time that's a change, right? The actualization of potentials is a change. So therefore, if it is uncaused, it has never been actualized, it has never changed, it has to pre-exist change, it has to pre-exist time.
No, it doesn't have to pre-exist change. Well, where does that follow? How does that follow?
Yeah. So it's the okay.
Wait, like what? Okay, where? Okay, suppose that you have a state of, like, you have some possible world that has existed for 10 seconds, and then suppose at 11 seconds, like there's nothing in that world other than, like, I don't know, space time. But and then suppose that, like, at 11 seconds, some contingent entity begins to exist. Does that entity need to pre-exist, like change or pre-exist time?
It can't begin to exist.
Why?
It
I mean,
can't
that's
begin
the
to
whole
exist.
dispute. I mean, that's the whole dispute. And yeah, like, why?
There's nothing to bring it into existence.
Okay, I mean, that's presupposing that some, like, that, like, every contingent entity requires something to bring it about, and that's the very thing that's in dispute. And I'm asking why.
I thought we were talking about was that, okay, when I asked
You
you
were saying that contingent entities
when I
require
asked
some
you,
sort of explanation.
Hold on. When I asked you initially, right, I made the claim about, I don't know if you remember when you said, I'm not using nothingness as a noun, right? And I was like, oh, are you trying to say that not that it's caused by nothing per se, but rather it has always existed, and so it depends on nothing. And then you clarified, and then we got into that whole extensionism dispute regarding what it means to be uncaused.
I don't require that if something isn't caused by anything, that it requires to exist, like it before time. Like, I don't accept that.
Yeah, but now we're talking about some sort of true disjunction here, because it's either, if you are uncaused, it's either the case that you do not depend on anything, so some sort of brute fact in a sense, or you depend on nothing as a noun, as a subject. Nothing is causing you to exist. The only other explanation would be something like you caused yourself, which is incoherent, and nothing caused you, which is also incoherent. So I don't understand. If we're saying that this thing pops into existence, there's going to be some blaring metaphysical issues and logical issues.
What are those metaphysical issues? Because presumably you want to say that it's going to be, like, metaphysically impossible, but we already established that you don't have any account of metaphysical modality. You agreed that you don't have one.
It will be metaphysically impossible by virtue of it being logically impossible.
Okay, what's the logical contradiction?
We'll be saying that nothing can both cause and not cause at the same time.
No, we're just saying that something could exist without some cause. That doesn't mean that nothing causes it.
Yeah, but
and not the case that nothing causes it.
I mean, the rationalization you gave for it is that it pops into existence. You said from 1 to 10 seconds, there's nothing. Maybe space time, I think you might have mentioned, I'm not sure. And you said at 11 seconds, this contingent thing pops into existence, no?
Yeah, like, suppose that it begins to exist. What's the contradiction?
Yeah.
At least logical contradiction in that.
Yeah, so first of all, let's just rule out the possibility of it always existing. Because if it's always existed, it would have never begun to exist. That's inconsistent. So then, if it pops into existence, or rather if it begins to exist, then what's it called? It's either the case that something caused it or nothing caused it, right? If something caused it, that would mean that it's not the
And by nothing, you don't mean it as a noun term, right? Because
I mean it.
Okay, because if you're taking nothing, okay, yeah, but I'm denying that those are, like, the only two options that are exhaustive.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but it's been changed, right? It's gone from a state of potentiality to actuality.
Well, yeah, no, I'm denying. Well, you're presupposing, like, this Aristotelian metaphysics of potentiality and actualization. Like, when have I accepted that?
I mean, I think for me, this is going to be a broad claim. I think that's really the only coherent, maybe not only coherent, but I think all forms of change you can describe to me are just reducible to potential and actuality.
Okay, I mean, sure, you can say that.
Yeah,
I can say that, like, unicorns don't exist. Okay, it's like irrelevant. I mean, you have to obviously provide.
When we say change, yeah, you're asking for an argument. Okay, perfect. So when we say change, we're referring to going from one state to another. Would you agree with that sort of normative definition?
You're going from one state to another?
Yes, that's how I view change, at least.
I mean, yeah, I mean, assuming that you don't need to, like, talk about, like, temporal, you're not, like, introducing, like, temporality, then yeah, sure. I mean, I'm fine with something minimal like that.
I mean, in order to go from one state to another, I mean, okay, you do realize that time, normatively speaking, I don't know if you have a different definition of time, but time, normatively speaking, is the progression of events. That would seem to imply change biconditionally.
The progression of events. I mean, I don't know if I accept that sort of definition regarding time, but you said that there would be some sort of metaphysical contradiction because of some lack of potential, right? Or some fact about potential, something going from non-being, but, like, not having its potential being actualized. Is that the sort of contradiction that you think ensues?
Yeah, it's a logical one.
Well, no, it's not a logical one. I mean, the only way that you can go from, well, yeah, I don't know how it would be a logical one. I mean, there's no logical contradiction. If you want to say that because it violates some fact about like actualization and potential. I mean, that's not like something that's like logically necessary. It's not like not like that thesis isn't logically necessary.
Okay, so do you agree? Okay, how do I word this? Do you agree? I'm not going to ask a silly question. You don't think it depends, do you? You don't think that this contingent thing depends on anything?
I mean, it doesn't need some other cause. It might depend on something, depending, because you use contingent in like two sorts of ways. You've said in the sort of dependency relation way, and also in the sort of like modal way, where like something could fail to exist.
I think they entail each other. That's why, apologies, right? I understand someone might say they don't. Like, you can be contingent and not have any.
Okay, well then, if you think they entail each other, then this is why I'm just like disagreeing. I mean, that's going to be the more fundamental disagreement. I guess you would have to show that then.
Yeah. So, okay, would you agree with this? Okay, actually, you probably would, right? The disjunction that you are either caused or uncaused is true. Okay. If you agree that there's a thing that is caused, you have to agree. If you agree that there's an effect that is caused, then obviously there is a cause, and that cause has to exist. So it can't be nothing, because nothing is the absence of existence.
Well, it doesn't have to. I mean, it could like cease to exist after it produces like the effect. There's nothing about it's like needing to like remain in existence. I mean,
but at T1, at the point at which the effect is produced, you'd agree that at that point in time, the cause concurrently exists alongside the effect.
Because it's this very wholesome super.
I mean, no, I think you can have like a cause that produces some effect that is a result of some sort of causal chain, but the effect, like, I mean, the cause ends up like, I don't know, ceasing to exist before the effect is like brought about. But it's like, the reason it's brought about is because you can tell some sort of like causal story between, I don't know, some initial cause and the effect.
But you still need the cause. I'm not really, not to sound rude, but I'm not really interested in it could cease to exist before the effect is brought about. As long as there's this dependency relation between the two, at one point in time, the cause had to have been existing. Do you agree?
Yeah, sure. But to be clear, I don't think that it's like true for any sort of thing that it like, if it began to exist, that it requires a cause. I'll just say. So I mean, you're not getting that, at least from what you've said so far.
Yeah, but you agree that for anything ever that exists ever, right? Ever, that it either is caused or uncaused. Yes?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. And then if it is caused, it depends on something that is actual. In the sense that it is in reality. It's not potential, it's not possible. It's actual. It's there. You'd agree?
It depends on something actual. You just mean that the effect depends on its cause.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. And the cause has to exist. The cause can't be something that doesn't exist.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so then that means then that if it's the case that something is caused and pops into existence, or it's impossible for something to be caused per se and pop into existence by virtue of nothing, right? It has to be something. It can't be the first member, right? And then the other side, the other option is that it's uncaused. Now, something is uncaused, then it would never be brought into existence. It would just always exist. That's my view. Brute facts, in a sense.
Yeah, where do you, like, how does that follow? That if something is uncaused, that it always has to exist?
Well, okay. You'd agree that all things that exist before they are brought into actuality, you probably wouldn't agree, so I might just give an explanation on top of this, but before all things are brought into actuality, they at least exist in the realm of potentials. So, for example, if a carpenter is making some sort of like table or chair, right, the potential for the chair is, or the possibility of the chair still exists. It might not be actual at that point in time, but the possibility for the chair exists. And then the carpenter actualizes that through his workmanship, right? And so through this way, we get some sort of like explanation, maybe not the best, but an explanation for how potentials pre-exist the actual form.
Yeah, I wouldn't catch this out in terms of potentials or actualization, because I don't have any reason to accept this sort of like Aristotelian or like Thomistic view about actualization and potential. I mean, typically the way it's understood, you have to endorse some sort of like ontological pluralism, and I'm not sympathetic to that sort of view. But yeah, I wouldn't catch this out in terms of potentials and actualization of potentials.
I mean, how would you catch it out?
Maybe in some like minimalistic sense, I was talking about like possibility and things being actualized, but not in terms of like this robust Aristotelian sort of metaphysics.
I mean, how would you catch it out then, if not through the Aristotelian notions?
By specifying an account that doesn't require an Aristotelian metaphysics.
Yeah.
I mean,
you go ahead and demonstrate one.
you can just talk about, like, take the same, I don't know, some example of like a sculptor and like the statue. You can just talk about the statue coming about from certain facts that obtain, like while the sculptor is like, drawing or carving out the marble or something. Like, that's it. I mean, you don't need to say something robust about the nature of
I'm
actualization.
confused. You said,
I mean, minimally, you just have to say that it's like possible, like if it brings about the statue, but it was like possible that it could have brought it about or something like that. But I mean, you don't have to think that there exist possibilities, whatever that means. I mean, other than to say that, like, I don't know, under some modal system, that, like, given the axioms and the rules of that system, that it's like possible, but you wouldn't have to specify.
I didn't understand
more robust
the
than
sculpture thing. You said that the sculpture would, the form of the sculptor. The fuck? The form of the sculpture. Wait, sculptor or sculpture? I'm fucking confused, bro. You said sculpture, right?
I'm saying it's take like some sculptor or sculpture. I don't fucking know. I already got confused. But no, sculptor.
Okay,
But
sculptor,
yeah.
the sculptor, or the form of the
Making me lose
sculpture
brain
comes
cells,
about
man.
from some facts that obtained. Is that what you said?
What was that?
So you said that the form of the sculpture comes about from some facts that obtain.
Yeah, the statue comes about through certain facts between the sculptor and like the marble, and it's like chipping away at it.
Yeah, wouldn't you? Okay, so I debated tons a little while ago on this, and I think his explanation was similar to yours. It was a different analogy, but I think it just describes the same thing. So, the chipping away at the sculpture seems to bring into existence the possibility of the statue existing.
Well, why does that have to be the case? Like, why isn't it just the case that it has to bring into existence like anything? It's just carving out. I mean, where do you have to like apply something that's like robust, like metaphysically robust here, other than just to say that, like, I don't know, that there is causation minimally, and like that the sculptor through carving out the marble can cause, I don't know, the statue.
I mean, okay, just okay. But did you agree that the sculptor causes the statue?
Yeah, sure.
That means that in order for the sculpture to exist, well, in order for the statue to exist, I should say, yeah, in order for the statue to exist, the sculptor would need to carve it. I think that's just analogous to me saying that the potential is actualized. Obviously, it sounds more like verbose and grandiloquent, but I think it means the same thing.
It doesn't mean the same thing, because the way that it's like generally understood by Thomists or by like Aristotelians, there's like this notion of act and potential is one that's like metaphysically robust and typically cashed out under some sort of ontological pluralist view. And I don't need to be committed to that view or to be committed to anything metaphysically robust other than maybe thinking that causation is like a feature of the world in order to say that a sculptor can carve out some statue out of marble.
Yeah, I understand the sculpture thing, but I think we're gonna go into like some sort of like cycle in the same with the essentials view, in which I think what you're describing to me sounds no different from the view of Aristotelian causality that I have in my mind, and you might see it differently. And I don't think we're gonna get anywhere when we're just deliberating over whether the sculpture actualizes some potential, whether it's as simple as him carving it out. To me, it means the same thing. If he's carving out the sculpture, at one point the sculpture didn't exist, and at another point it did exist, and in between you have the sculptor, which carves out the sculpture, the statue, and then makes it exist in a sense. Then he brings into existence, he makes actual the possibility of the statue. But if you see it differently, then we can just move on, because I don't want to go into the same cycle.
Well, the issue is that like the way that you're describing the scenario is like in terms that need not be understood in like an Aristotelian sense, in like this metaphysically robust sense, where you're committed to, things having different like types of existence. Things like, I don't know, can be pure act, or things can be like potential or have potential existence. Like, I don't need to be committed to that in order to use those same terms and describe what's going on. And that's all I'm saying. And the issue, I think your confusion is coming from the fact that you're using these sort of terms that are kind of neutral to whether or not you need to be ontologically committing to some robust thesis about act and potency. And because you're using these terms in this sort of way, you're not seeing what the dispute is. But I mean, I think I've said what the dispute is already, and I don't know. It's just kind of same thing as like the last like point. It just kind of keeps
Yeah,
going.
I'm not gonna lie. Maybe it's a tracking issue on my part. I have no idea what we're supposed to be discussing now. I think this was in relation to the
Well,
uncaused disjunction.
no, the point that we were discussing is that you were trying to say that it's like logically impossible for there to be something that's contingent that doesn't have a cause.
I think it would probably just circle back to some like.
You were saying that because it circles back to act and potency, and then I was disputing that I needed to accept some sort of account of act and potency, and that's like
okay. I think the way I probably formulate it is if you just presuppose that act potency exists, right? Just for the sake of progression, I understand I didn't get to convince you, but if we presuppose it exists, then you could probably say at T1, which T just represents time, at T1, nothing, as in like just nothing existed, just the absence of existence. And then at T2, this contingent thing existed, and this contingent thing was uncaused. Well, under like my Aristotelian mind, right? At T1, you have this potential, and then at T2, this potential has been made actual, right? And then this process would need a cause, right? Otherwise, it would just be saying that it's like some sort of like random occurrence in a sense. I don't know if you'd be fine with like submitting to the idea that it's random and just happened. I don't know.
Well, when you say if we presuppose act and potency, I mean, obviously, I hope you understand that I'm like not granting this, but even that, like you said that there would be a logical contradiction. Are you saying that act and potency, at least the way you're understanding it, is going to be governing like the space of logical possibility and impossibility? Because that's the only way that you're going to be able to say that there would be some logical contradiction. And like
it would just be saying that. It would just be saying that if we say that act potency, causality, whatever is true, and we have this thing that pops into existence, that means at one point it was potential, and then it was made actual.
No, but when you say it's true, you have to say that like it governs the space of logical possibility and impossibility, because you're committed to saying something stronger than just saying it's like a metaphysical thesis that's like necessarily true. You're saying that it's like logically necessary. That's what you're saying, because you're saying that if there's some sort of contingent entity that doesn't have a cause, well, then there's a logical contradiction that ensues. And the way that you try to justify that was through this act and potency. But then you said, well, I'm not going to make you agree that like this is like true. Well, supposing that it is true, then could we get this sort of contradiction? And I'm saying, well, the only way that you can get that contradiction is if you're saying that act and potency governs the space of logical possibility and impossibility. And I mean, there's two tasks on the table. One, to motivate this view of act and potency, and then to motivate a view where act and potency is governing logical possibility and impossibility and necessity. And you're trying to say that's like logically necessary, which is like straightforwardly, like obviously false.
I don't agree that my worldview is squiggly at best, like wishy-washy, but like I just wanted to discuss with you to see how it like held up against like atheistic contentions. And I figured that like if I was to debate someone from like like for example like the politics religion server, they might be like non-progressive. So I was like, let me go debate someone that I think might not or might at least allow me to like at least flesh out my view and then give the contention and see if like I can hold up against them. But yeah, it was a good discussion. I don't really have anything else to say really, because I kind of understand the whole logical possibility thing being what's the word, a strong claim to make. So
yeah, well, if you don't have anything more to say, then we can just leave it there.
Yeah, nice concession. Good debate.
All right.
Fascinating.